Thanks for joining us here on 90s Plus on this Valentine's Day. Special day for, hey gentlemen, don't forget, is Valentine's Day.
And ladies too.
And ladies, of course, as well. Well, since it is the Day of Love, we thought it might be a good idea to talk about the science and psychology behind L-O-V-E, behind love. And so we're going to talk about the science of emotion, which is a little maybe counterintuitive, but there is an actual science behind emotion, right? And we're joined now by Dr. Payal Kohli, our 9 News medical expert, for a bit more on this. Dr. Kohli, I guess, first of all, there really is a science of love, isn't there?
There really is, Chris. And, as a cardiologist, I'm all about matters of the heart. And we normally think about heart disease and those types of things. But emotion is a big driver. And what we've realized is that our mental state, our emotional state, can have a lot of physiologic effects on our body, a lot of biological effects. And in fact, being in love can be one of the healthiest medicines out there. So today on Valentine's Day, I do want to prescribe love to every single person and different types of love. So it doesn't necessarily have to be romantic love, but just social connectedness can really create many of these cascade of kind of beneficial physiologic, psychological, and emotional benefits that we see.
So that's interesting. So you said it's not just relationship. Obviously, we think of Valentine's Day, we think about flowers
love.
and the romantic love, but this can also transcend into social relationships.
Very much so. And in fact, what we're learning from the science is that, and we don't yet know what the mechanism of these positive effects is, if it's just that social connectedness, because you have a network, you have family and friends you can lean on, that leads to less substance abuse, less anxiety, more compliance with medications, more compliance with preventive things like taking care of yourself. Or if it's something actually physiologic, where that social connectedness creates a chemical reaction inside your body that then exerts its beneficial biological effects.
Interesting. So how does maybe love affect our brain? Are there? You mentioned that there's tangible impacts, aren't there?
It is. It's very interesting because we see chemical changes that occur when we're in love. And actually the part of the brain that lights up is the dopamine receptors, which are the receptors that can light up when you win the lottery, when you're using cocaine. They're the happy receptors in our brain. And so, of course, when we're in love, and we've all experienced this, we're very happy. So that kind of happiness emotion gets amplified. And then, happiness begets more happiness. You get an amplification of that dopamine signal. When you're first in a relationship, you know how you get those butterflies in your stomach? That's cortisol. And so that's a stress hormone. So initially, a little bit of cortisol is actually good for us because it triggers that energy and it triggers that fight or flight feeling. Too much can be bad. So you want just that little surge in the beginning, then that dopamine kind of wakes up, and that's when many of the beneficial effects kick in. In fact, what we see is that people who are in love have lower blood pressures, they have stronger immune systems, so their immunity is better, they feel pain less. So their sensitivity to pain, their pain threshold can change. We see, of course, less substance abuse. And all of this, Chris, ends up translating into higher longevity. So people who are in love or who are in a happily married relationship, they actually have a lower risk of dying from all kinds of things like heart disease and cancer, pneumonia, all kinds of stuff.
By the way, our single friends out there, we're gonna get to you here in just a second. Don't worry, this is not to just make you feel bad that you're not in a relationship. So we will get to that here in just a second. I'm going to ask maybe a difficult question, maybe one that's a bit difficult to ask. Is there a science that being in a relationship, period, makes us happier? Or is this strictly good relationships?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. So no, what we see is that if you're in a bad relationship, it can actually have the opposite effect. Because then that cortisol level goes up, you're fighting, you're arguing, you're upset, you're stressed out, goes up and stays up. And that can actually cause the adverse reactions to occur. It can raise your blood pressure, it can cause insulin resistance, it can cause weight gain, more substance use, more anxiety, more stress. So, and similarly for married people, it's really the ones that are happily married that see many of these beneficial biological benefits. So it's important to evaluate your relationships and ensure that you're giving and getting in a really positive way, because what you don't want is for a relationship or difficult relationship to start to wear on your health, which it certainly can do.
Interesting. Let's get to the single friends here for just a second. So, do you have advice about the best way to spend a Valentine's Day if you're single? Because I know there's a lot of different ways to do it, and different social mechanisms. What's your advice?
I would say we've got so much cultural pressure for people to be in a relationship on Valentine's Day that it can really make you feel sorry for yourself, self-pity, and kind of send you down a spiral. But instead, I think you should celebrate all kinds of love. So I think that's the most important message. Valentine's Day is not just about romantic love, it's about all kinds of love in your life. And I'm single. So when I woke up this morning, I thought about my mom and my brother and my niece and nephew and all the people that I love, more than life itself, and celebrate those relationships, what makes you happy about those relationships, because that triggers that same dopamine in the brain, triggers the same happy chemicals, and you can get a lot of the same biological benefits. So that's the first piece, is that everybody has love in their life. You just have to find it, look for it, and celebrate it. And then the second piece of it is that, you really don't want to be on social media, and you don't want to be kind of propagating an image or what you think society expects you to do today. So there's no rules for Valentine's Day. You can do absolutely anything or everything. You don't have to go to a dinner. You don't have to be seeing somebody. You don't have to have an event. And you can just, celebrate life in whatever way makes you happy and just kind of helps your self-esteem and self-image. We shouldn't get caught up in this cultural whirlwind that we have, where every single one of us has to be in a relationship for whatever reason.
Yeah, no, I think it's great advice there, and I really think that the focus on relationships is something I haven't. Maybe I'm laying off the wrong parts of the internet here, but I feel like I haven't heard that a ton. I think that's a really interesting anecdote and a good way to maybe, I don't know, counteract a lot of that FOMO you might feel for not being in a relationship, right?
Yeah, it's time to shift the narrative. And we're in charge of shifting that narrative, each of us individually and each of us as a community. We need to redefine love, Valentine's Day, the celebration of love. And the other thing I would say as a heart doctor is that let's be healthy today. Let's take care of our hearts, not just emotionally, but also physically. So I'm looking at you, Chris, all those Valentine's Day candies.
What do you mean me?
Candies and such, they can be toxic for us. So we don't want to binge on those types of things. We don't want to use today as an excuse to fall off the wagon and, stop following the diets that we're supposed to be following. So we really want to make sure that we take care of our hearts. Emotionally, of course, with all the things we talked about, but also physically take care of our hearts today. Get in an extra run. Do a little more exercise. Be gentle to your heart from a physical standpoint so that you can kind of nurture it in both ways.
Okay, I like that. For what it's known, I'm known in the office for being a bit of a candy fiend. I love my candy. I do run a lot, but I love my candy. But that's a different story. But Dr. Payal Kohli, great advice. Single folks, lay off the gram and definitely spend some time texting those loved ones that you've got in your life, because we got all of them. I think it's great advice. But thanks so much for joining us here on this Valentine's Day.
Thank you, Chris. Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day.